Welcome back to my comic book love channel. That was new. I never do that. I don't know why I did that. But today I did want to focus on comic writers. I've read so many comics over the years, ever since I was got heavily into comics about 12, around that age, 10, 12, around there. Started really getting into comics with the Ultimate Universe even more, because that was kind of my age I think it was aimed for. And then just since then, been reading comics and manga for the rest of my life. And there's a lot of comic book writers, and this list is huge. You guys can't even see the whole thing. I'm going to show you real fast. It's big. So to finish this by, the end of tonight, I would like to just kind of go through them starting right now. And right before I do get to it, though, I do want to state that I am not going to judge these writers based on how great they are as a writer in terms of like, this is factual, the blah 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 blah. This is my opinion on writers that I enjoy the most reading, that I get excited when I see their name on a comic. Some work, some don't, and so that's why even my ranking, the worst ranking, is just not for me. I think writers or artists or any kind of medium is made in mind for different types of people, and these are the kind of writers that I usually enjoy. Well, at least the ones that end up high on my list. But anyway, let's get right into it. So Jason Aaron's first up, and Jason Aaron is definitely the perfect first choice for me because I really enjoy a good portion of the stuff. I think it's solid. I think it's fun. I think it does a good job of getting me into the kind of atmosphere that he's setting, which could be really gritty, could be Southern feel to it that I like, and not just because he wrote Southern Bastards or not because he's from a Southern state, but it just feels that type of comic usually. Now, I will say I am not a huge fan of some of his bigger work. Avengers is not a run that I am enjoying, but I'm so glad that it's ending. Saying that, this guy did write Southern Bastards. He wrote pretty damn good Thor, in my opinion. He wrote Scalped, and so for that, I think he's a solid writer, but not one of my favorites, if you make sense. Like, I'll enjoy it. I'll read some of his stuff. Some stuff doesn't work, some does, but it's right in the middle, so a solid, fun reading time. Man, it is hard to see some of these names. It's very tiny and I'm blind. Abinett. So, if you don't know, I can't pronounce fucking anything in this world. Anyway, we're gonna get right into this writer who has written some of my favorite cosmic stuff. I really enjoyed Annihilation. I enjoyed Nova. I enjoyed his Guardians run. Overall, he's a very solid cosmic writer, and I think that's why I kind of favored a lot of his stuff for the Marvel. His DC writing is the best way I can sum it up. I think his Aquaman run is decent enough. I think his Titans run is horrible. But that's just my personal opinion. So, kind of like Aaron, I think that he falls kind of in the middle. I haven't read anything from him that I think blew my mind. I think Annihilation is some great stuff, but then he got some things that don't work for me. Maybe if I read more of his creator-owned stuff, I don't know how much he's made, I'll get more into him. But for right now, I've mostly read his Big Two stuff, and it didn't impress me all that much, but I think it was solid. But I'd probably say that I enjoyed more of Aaron's stuff, so I'm going to put him right behind Aaron. Is this Andreyko? I think that's how you say his name. His writing really surprised me with Manhunter. That has to be one of the most surprisingly fun and interesting comics I read. Saying that, I was not a fan of his Batwoman. Now, I know he was kind of pushed into doing that by DC, but since then, I didn't really enjoy too much of his stuff other than Supergirl. I thought was pretty solid. Not great, but solid. I think that he is definitely a capable writer. I think he has some really cool stories. And if I were to just judge this on Manhunter, this would be probably great stuff with a few misses. But also, besides Manhunter, I don't really think I loved anything he's written. So I would say he's in the middle. I don't think I've read enough to really put him above these two, because these two I've read a lot more from. So as much as I like Manhunter, the rest of the stuff I read kind of just falls in the okay section. So I'm just going to put him right in the solid, fun reading time, which looks like a lot of these writers might just be falling into that. Oh, Azzarello. This is one of the writers I don't really understand because I don't like a lot of his stuff. I love his Wonder Woman. I think it's amazing. I think it's so refreshing at the time and so different. Like, I understand people who don't like it because it's so different, but for me, it's basically God of War with Diana as Kratos, and I'm very much okay with that. I really enjoyed this run. The art on it was amazing, but we're focused on writing, and again, kind of like Andreyko, if it was just Wonder Woman, That's one of my favorite, if not my favorite Wonder Woman run of all time. He'd be high up there, but absolutely everything I've ever read from him other than that so far has not been great. The worst offender, being Batman Damned, was atrocious, like almost unreadable in my honest opinion. So saying that, I think a lot of his stuff is edgy but doesn't have the heart of other writers I'm going to talk about here. So I'm just going to have to put very few things I enjoyed, which sucks because his Wonder Woman, great. The rest, no. All right, so Bendis is a very controversial figure. Some people don't like his writing. Some say all of his characters talk the same. And for me, I absolutely love his work. I think it's some of the best he's ever created, or best comics I've ever read. Yeah, I do understand the complaints. I do understand in his later career, just like any writer, I feel, does kind of lose it a little bit. But when he was on top, when he was creating things like the new X-Men, sorry, I know that, X-Men fan, like, how dare you? I did like New X-Men, though, and I liked his Uncanny. But no, I was going to say New Avengers. He changed the game. He brought the level of popularity back to the Avengers that nobody really knew. I'm telling you, I was there at that time. It was amazing. On top of that, he also created Ultimate Spider-Man and did some phenomenal work there. It's one of my favorite comics, period. But not only that, he created my favorite Daredevil run of all time, which is saying a lot because there's other writers of Daredevil that create absolutely stunning runs, but that run just blew me away. He also wrote Alias, which is another excellent comic. Yeah, Bendis just, for me, is one of the greatest writers of all time. He's created some of my favorite works, and he's going very high on that list. I know some of you who got into comics maybe 10 years ago will disagree heavily, but if you were here back in the early 2000s, Bendis was the one I couldn't stop reading. So I'm going to put him very high on my list. Breeson's kind of that, like, really, like, coming in and does some really fun runs. I think with comics, you don't need always to have a deep story or a dark story and, you know, heavy character motivations. Not to say that Breeson doesn't do that in his runs, but he doesn't have like a major focus. He wants to write comics to have fun. I also think that his self-created stuff is great. So that's the thing. His Big Two stuff, good. I like it. It's always fun. I actually think his Predator run was really good. But I would say his creator own is where you really got to read his stuff. He just really hones on the fact that he just like noir, crime, just brutal sometimes, dark stories that really work for me. Saying that though, I wouldn't say he's, you know, made some of my favorite comics, but he makes a lot of great stuff that I really enjoy with very few misses. There's very few things I pick up and I'm like, nah, I don't like this. And for that, that's pretty high up there. So I'm going to have to put him in great stuff with a few misses. You know what? I should change that. I think I meant to say great stuff with few misses. Let me change that to very few misses. There we go. Brubaker. Do I really have to talk much about Brubaker? Legend. Legend. Talk about a writer who consistently is still putting out amazing stuff. Like, I mean, unbelievable that he is still writing comics and they're still this high caliber. This guy's been writing for like, I don't know, 30, 40 years now, probably. I started reading him back when I was a kid, and he's still putting out stuff. So that's a long time. Of course, his long-running teammate, or whatever you want, his team up, his artist, Sean Phillips, really helps boost it for me. But he is one of the most phenomenal writers. He's written very few things I disliked, and he has made some of the greatest things. I have the whole set of Criminal down there. Listen, this if you haven't read Brubaker, forget his Big Two stuff, which is solid. Go read his creator-owned stuff. It is some of the greatest crime stories of all time, not just in comics, in media, period. All right, so we have Busiek. I think this guy has some of the most consistently well-written stuff. I have to say, nothing that I've ever read from him, though, really blew me away. That's the big thing with him. I think everything I've read from him, I at least enjoyed. There's very few things that I picked up from him, like, this doesn't work for me. So that is kind of amazing. His Thunderbolts run was really fun. I only read a little bit of his Avengers, really enjoyed it. And so I've read a couple of his creator-owned stuff, too, and that was solid. So I would say that he's a really solid writer. I don't think I get as excited seeing his name on stuff as, say, Breeson. When Breeson comes on, I'm expecting a high-octane, action, fun story. So I would say that, but I will say that there's almost nothing that I've read from him that I disliked, and so I'm going to have to put him in great stuff with very few misses. So Cates is probably my favorite, like, up-and-coming, well, not anymore up-and-coming, but favorite writer in the last 10 years who came into the game. I think he has a lot of fun ideas. Does it all work? Of course not. That's just a part of the game. There's some stuff you make that just doesn't work for people. And I don't even really love his Hulk run, and I thought his Thor run kind of floundered out in the end. However, I absolutely loved his Thanos run. I loved almost all his other Marvel work, really. Even the Guardians was pretty good, at least the first half. But what he really excelled at is his creator-owned stuff. See, that's the big thing for me. If you create creator-owned stuff that hooks me, it just stays in my mind forever, more than almost any run of the big two. And having stuff like Baby Teeth, Redneck, so many, oh my gosh, Ghost Fleet, like, these stories really stuck with me, and those are the ones that I think that I would recommend to people when they're picking up a Donny Cates comic to get into him. So saying that, he has worked on some of my favorite comics. Do I say he has as big an impact to me as Bendis? No, because Bendis is really what made me a comic fan. And would I say he's as consistently amazing as Brubaker? No, because Brubaker has been in the game so long, it's very hard to top him. But I will say that I do think he's worked on some of my favorite modern comics in the last 5 to 10 years. I'm sorry, I'm trying to read that. Is that Coates? I like his stuff. I think that his Captain America run was solid. I think his Black Panther run, not as much. I think it got better with the intergalactic fights and stuff. But yeah, his writing style has improved for me. I think he came very much from a novel writer to a comic writer as he went along, which helps. But I don't think that he really kind of stays on course. So when Wakanda went to space, I was really invested in the first half, and then it kind of went out. Same thing with Captain America. Really loved the first half, then it kind of fizzled out. So I will always give his stuff a chance because I'm interested, and I think he is a solid writer who does enjoy writing these characters, but nothing really blew me away. So I'm gonna have to go with solid writer. And yeah, I'll put him in front of Andraco. I'm more excited to read something with his name on just to see if I enjoy it. All right, so Cook, people are going to hate me for this. I have read very little from him, so I'm going to put it for not for me, but really this is a section of not for me, or I haven't read enough of him to really kind of talk about it, So I don't want to just talk about something I don't know much about. Peter David, I like Peter David. I think, again, similar to Busiek and Breeson, I feel like when I see his name, I'm like, this is going to be a pretty good time. I don't know if I ever read anything that was like, boom, flew up to one of my favorite writers. And even reading the Hulk, his run the Hulk now and reading it, again, very enjoyable. But again, I wasn't like, wow, this is someone I gotta hunt down all his work. But I do think he is consistently a solid writer. I know, unfortunately, he's going through a lot of health issues right now, so I hope he recovers. But as a writer that I enjoy and read a lot of his stuff, I can't say that it blew me away, but I think he has a lot of great stuff that is interesting to read, and there's very few things I read that I thought, let's throw this in the garbage. So I think he belongs right up there with Busiek and Breeson. I actually would put him in front of Busiek just because I'd probably pick up some with David's name on it a little bit quicker. So Paul Dini, another writer I didn't really read too much. I read some of his Batman run. I do have the omnibus, so I will have a better judge of that, but I'm going to put that in not for me too. Again, not because it's not for me, but I didn't read enough to really judge. So Dugan kind of comes under a lot of fire a lot of time. I'm not really sure why. I think he's a very competent writer. I think he writes some really good stuff. I actually really like his self-created stuff like Analog and things like that. But I will say that I think his X-Men and everything, they're just good, solid, but never above that. Never have I read anything from him in the big two where I'm like, phenomenal. Never. Saying that, I do think he's a solid writer, and I would love to read more of his stuff. I don't have any issues with his writing, and that's something. Sometimes I don't need to be my mind blown. I just want a solid writer, and Dugan, I think, is a solid writer. So, yeah, I'm going to put him in solid fun time. Put him right in the middle of it all, because I think I would always check out his stuff. Oh, well, Ellis is kind of controversial after all his stuff came out a few years ago. But we're focusing on the writing part of it, and I like Ellis's writing. I do think sometimes it's high concept. He kind of reminds me similar to Another writer we're probably going to talk about, I haven't seen if he's on there, but I'm assuming Hickman's on here. But very similar, where they have this high concept and sometimes they don't have the characters to back it up or the dialogue that makes it interesting. Saying that, I do think he's made some really fun stuff. I really liked his Wildstorm stuff. And yeah, he's overall a really, pretty good writer. There's very few things I've read from him that I was like, ugh, awful. I don't know if I ever read anything from him that was like awful, but I'd say some stuff was okay. But I do think he makes a lot of great stuff, and he made one of the greatest teams ever, the Authority. So I'm going to put in great stuff with very few misses. I'm going to put him right next to Busiek. Those are the kind of the writers where I'm prepared to read something good here, something even great. But I don't think I ever read anything from Ellis where I was like, phenom. Ewing is a weird one for me. I would love to do an interview with Ewing because I do think that he has some of the coolest ideas. I think that out of all these writers, he might be one of the biggest fanboys next to Busiek. Like, this guy really loves the lore and characters of Marvel Universe. I feel it when I read it. Saying that, I don't always love his writing style. His dialogue sometimes doesn't hook me. It's weird. I think it's always solid. I think it's always an enjoyable read. But it's sometimes I don't know if I ever read anything where I'm like, yeah, that's great. Even the ones that are critically acclaimed, like X-Men Red, didn't really make me feel that way. I'd say Immortal Hulk was probably the closest to reaching some of the great stuff, but also fumbled the ball a few times, even though that is a very long run. So that's actually pretty good for how long it is. But anyway, to say that, I think he's a solid writer. He's probably ahead of most of the solid writers for me. I would pick up his stuff before almost anyone on this list. Just because of the stuff that he has put out that I liked, but not quite in the greats for me. Fraction, it's hard for Fraction for me, because Sex Criminals, at least the first half, is amazing, and I think his Hawkeye is phenomenal, as is his Iron Fist, a little that I read, but I did not like his X-Men at all, and I think his Fantastic Four kind of sucked ass. So he's kind of like in this weird mix for me, where I think he is a very talented writer when he's on the right project, but he also made some not so fun projects that I did not enjoy reading. So saying that, he's in the solid writer as well. There's not much that I dislike from him, but not much that I think is, well, I do think he's in solid, but he's a high solid. Gage is a weird one because a lot of people don't talk about him, but he's had some really good comic issues here and there. He definitely feels like a writer that comes in and puts his work in here and there as kind of tie-ins or more issues in between the bigger stuff. He wrote a lot of Buffy. He wrote some Angel, things like that I thought were really good. I don't know if I'd go as far as say that I think he's made a lot of great stuff, but I think he's made a lot of solid stuff, and no one really ever brings him up in conversation, which is weird. He also wrote the Spider-Man game, I believe, for the PS4. I was going to say PS5, but it is on PS5. So, yeah, I think he's a solid writer all around. I'm going to put him right in the middle. I'll probably put him right next to Fraction, actually. Actually, I put him ahead because I think he's a more consistently solid writer. Gaiman, again, another writer I feel like I don't have to talk much about. Sandman is great. Books of Magic is great. I didn't read his Miracle Man, but I'm expecting it to be great. So yeah, I'm gonna put Gaiman in great stuff. I won't say that I'm like always hungry to read his stuff, because it is very deep sometimes and a lot of talking, a lot of exposition. But when I'm sucked into his world, there's very little that could compare. So I think he's a great writer with very few misses. Gillian is weird because I am enjoying his current X-Men output. I really liked his AXE, and I do think that he is a very talented writer on certain projects, but I do not like his creator-owned stuff, which is really interesting because usually it's the other way around. I don't like Die, and I really did not like Divine and whatever that was. So he actually would have been very few things I enjoyed about 3 years ago. But now I do think he is a solid writer, but probably in the middle. Enjoyable, but not great. Oh, is that the glass guy who wrote Teen Titans? He's alright. There was only a few things I enjoyed from him. Very few things. Sean Gordon Murphy, I'm assuming that is. Excellent artist. Hands down. There's no denying that. As far as a writer, I do think he's good. I do think he sometimes needs to rein it in. I think an editor needs to be like, cut this fucking long dialogue. It's just too much. But I do like his White Knight stuff. All that stuff's actually pretty fun and interesting. I can't say like when I see his name, I'm like, gotta pick it up. I didn't really like Punk Rock Jesus, but if this was an artist, this would be great stuff. Where if you misses, hands down. As a writer, as we're ranking a writer, I'm gonna have to go with Solid Fun Time. And again, I think that's in the middle. I enjoy his stuff more than some of the ones down here, but not great. Hickman is one of those writers I really do enjoy. I do think he has a few misses, but very few misses. I think his X-Men is great. I think his Fantastic Four is great. I thought his Avengers was great. I thought East to West was great. I mean, this guy really makes some of my favorite comics at times, but he also has some stinkers here and there. He has a few misses, I'd say. Again, also very high concept. I think I like his concepts sometimes more than his actual comics. But yeah, overall, Hickman is a very good writer. I probably would read or pick up a Hickman book more than most of my great stuff. Yeah, I put it very high. Hickman's up there. The only thing with Hickman is when I pick up a comic for him, I'm kind of prepared to be like, this is a great concept, but I don't know what the fuck is happening. Higgins is an okay writer when it came to the Big Two. Wasn't a big fan of his Nightwing and most of his Big Two stuff. But his Power Rangers, hell yeah. His current run with, oh my god, Radiant Black, great. He really stepped it up, so it's weird. If you told me a few years ago, I'd probably put him in very few things I enjoyed, but he became a solid, fun writer. He's almost there with the great stuff for me. If Radiant Black continues to produce really good stuff, it will be, but not quite there yet. I'd say he's right in between Gage and Ewing. Tini Howard, I don't really like a lot of her stuff. I think it's okay. I just don't really feel like the characters she's writing are characters that I would enjoy reading. I think it's just not for me. So, unfortunately, there's going to be not for me. And that's one that's not for me. I don't think she's a bad writer. I don't think the stuff she's writing around is bad. I just don't think the stories are really for me. Humphreys, I really liked his Green Lantern, but I have to say that's pretty much the only thing I like. So it's very few things that I enjoyed. Johns is one of the better writers for DC. I think as far as a DC writer, he's probably one of the top tier because of how much love and history he knows about all these characters. Saying that, some of his stuff was a little wonky at times and it felt very much like fan fiction, which I guess everything is fan fiction to a point, right, in the Big Two. But he started actually putting out creator-owned, and I think that's the big test. Can you write stuff that's not already put there? And he did. I only read Grieger, and it was enjoyable. I would say if I see him on a DC project, I'm almost guaranteed to at least check it out and almost likely enjoy it. I'd say he does make mostly great stuff with few misses, but only DC, which I think limits him to a lot of these other writers. I've seen them write DC, Marvel, and the creator-owned, and I was always ready to kind of check their stuff out. Jurgens is a solid writer in the sense that I think he's a great Superman writer. He's also a solid artist, which I didn't know until I really started investing in going back in time and reading stuff. But as far as a writer, he does make some really good stuff at times. I think his Action Comics that came out in the Rebirth era was actually really good and really fun. I think, unfortunately, when you get older, like in the 40s and 50s and 60s, you kind of can't write child dialogue that well, and his was not great with the family dynamic. But I do think he gets Clark, and I do think he writes a great Superman. I do think that he has fun, and I think he loves comics. So that really comes through when I read his stuff. Saying that, I think it's always solid. I don't really have much issue with his stuff, but I wouldn't say it's some of the best. I'd probably put it right in the middle. I never read anything quite as enjoyable as Southern Bastards for me, or Scalped, but I enjoy his stuff. Tom King is absolutely one of my favorite writers in the last years. Again, another controversial figure in terms of people seem to either love his work or hate it. I get that. It's definitely a darker tone, but I think we need that. As someone who actually really does enjoy Identity Crisis, I really do enjoy that style of darkness. Now, it's not for everyone, and I can totally understand if you don't like his work, but for me, King has made some of my favorite comics in the last 10 to 15 years, especially things like Mr. Miracle, and I even enjoyed stuff like this Batman run a lot. For the most part, the ending was but yeah, I'm always intrigued when I see his name on there. I don't think everything he's done, especially his recent output, hasn't really been for me, but I do enjoy a lot of his stuff, and I'm going to put it high up there. I think he's very similar to Kate's, where I can understand why someone doesn't enjoy his stuff. I think Kate's stuff is more fun in terms of like just jumping in, but King, if I want some deep and dark and fucked up, I'm usually going to get that and enjoy it. Lemire is absolutely an okay DC and Marvel writer. Some of his stuff's really good, but some of it not so good. Creator owned. There's a few little flunders here and there, but absolutely some of the greatest comics I ever read. And his universe, Black Hammer, if you are not reading this, what the fuck are you doing? Because not only is Black Hammer the main comic good, but his world of Black Hammer, where he writes side stories of all these different characters in the universe, absolutely epic. And I mean, Sweet Tooth, great. I mean, he's written Royal City, like, crush me as someone who loves to write as well. Excellent character driven work and family dynamics, some of the best in the business. So yeah, he has written some of my favorite comics. If it wasn't for those DC, well, mostly Teen Titans, the fucking God Earth 1-1, I would say he's one of my favorite. Actually, no, fuck it. He is one of my favorite. I always want to read his stuff, so he's going high up there. I actually put him in front of Cates and King because he really resonated with me lately with some of his work that he's put out, and also his Swamp Thing is fucking great. You guys got to read that. Lobdell, not for me. Loeb, this is a writer that I enjoyed when I was younger, and as I'm reading him, I'm starting to see more and more of his flaws, especially with the dialogue and his humor. Saying that, he did make Hush, and I do like Hush a lot, and he also made Long Halloween, which I'm not a fan of, but a lot of people love, so I respect that he's made classics. Saying that, he also destroyed the Ultimate Universe with his fucking Ultimates 3 and Ultimatum, so for that, fuck you, Loeb. No, I'm just kidding. But yeah, he's not for me. The more I'm reading him, the more I'm not liking a lot of his stuff. Millar, so if you don't know the history between me and Millar, I made a joke on Twitter saying that you write stuff for Hollywood to get a pitch. He got really pissed off and he blocked me. Fuck you, Millar, you piece of shit. I'm just kidding. Millar does make some really good stuff. I do think he's one of the reasons I got into comics with the Ultimates, and I'm not actually going to put him there, but he is a solid, fun reading time. I almost always expect to at least have a bit of fun reading his, but he's also made some atrocious shit, and his Kick-Ass is one of the most spiteful comics I've read after the first volume. So yeah, I don't know, he's very mixed bag for me, but I do expect to at least want to read his stuff when I pick it up. Miller is, I mean, he's made Daredevil, one of the greatest runs ever, and he's also written Dark Knight Returns, which I reread recently and enjoyed it. And he's also written Year One, which that is also phenomenal. He's also written Sin City, which has its flaws, but is also a really interesting take in the noir style. Mixed bag for me, though, because he's written some of the worst comics that I've read. So I think I'm going to put him in great stuff. I don't think he has that many misses that I've read. But he's very low. I'd pretty much read any of these other writers before I would read his stuff. Moore has written some stuff that I don't like, but he's also a legend. He also wrote the greatest Swamp Thing ever, and it's like 40 years later, so that's saying some. Yeah, Moore's high up there. I definitely put him up there, but I will say that I gotta be in the mood for Moore, because man, he can write too much sometimes. So I'm gonna put him right next to Busiek and David. These are all three around the same. Morrison, man, when he writes something that I love, I absolutely am stunned and just love the entire thing. When he writes something I don't like, I absolutely hate it. So I know this might be a little controversial. I'm gonna put him in just solid, but I'm gonna put him in the front of the line for solid because I am intrigued when he's writing something. Orlando, I don't like anything that Steve Orlando has ever written. I don't know if it's just not for me. Obviously, he's still getting gigs and people obviously buying the comics. But for me, I think that anything I've ever read from him, his best probably being Martian Manhunter mini, is either okay at best, Martian Manhunter, or absolutely atrocious, his Justice League. Yeah, I don't like anything he writes. He's probably the lowest of not for me, because when I see his name, I'm not even going to bother. Percy is a solid writer. Solid. And that's it. Never read anything I was like, whoa. But I did read a lot of his stuff. I'm like, solid. And that's pretty much it. I'd say Morrison's a little higher there in Ewing because I'm more interested when they have their name on there. But he's still solid enough where he's going to go on there. All right, so we have up there Priest. Priest is got to be one of the craziest writers because his style is so weird and so different. And sometimes I don't know what the fuck is happening in the story. But I gotta say, I'm always going to give it a chance because sometimes Priest comes swinging and hits it, man. Deathstroke was something else. Black Panther was something else. Priest can do good shit. So check it out. So yeah, I'm going to put that in the great stuff. But I'm going to put it kind of near Miller. Yeah, not Millar. Fuck Millar. Miller. Where I think it's a solid time. Oh man, you can't even see that. Let me lower my. All right, is that better for you guys? Now you can see. Some of the writers more who I put up there. But yeah, I put Miller and Priest kind of in the same category where I'm always thinking I'm gonna get some good or great. Sometimes it's a little flop, but very few for me for those two. I don't know who that is. P. Thompson. I don't know who that is. Sorry, I feel like an idiot if I do read his stuff. I'm sorry. Remender. So when I read Remender, there's one thing I know I'm getting into, some depressing ass shit. I mean, Remender's written some of my favorite comics ever, hands down. I think his X-Force is great. I think his Uncanny Avengers is great. I think his self-created stuff, like, wow, sorry, this is a long list. Deadly Class is absolutely amazing. And then I was kind of like floundering a little bit because I thought Scumbag was awful. So I was like, maybe he's going to drop a level. And then he came out with Righteous Vengeance. And I was like, dude, still got it. So for that, he's definitely going to go and work on some of my favorite stuff for really Deadly Class alone. But also Low and Black Science are excellent too. I would say that he's not, I'm not as like wowed by him as the other writers on here in terms of like, I'm going to check out their stuff first. But Remender always gives me a good depressing time. Rucka is right there with David, Busiek, Breeson, Moore, where I expect great stuff. There are a few misses for me for him. But yeah, he's just one of those solidly great writers most of the time. Seeley's a solid writer. I think where he suffers is not the concept. I think his concepts are really cool. I think his dialogue isn't always so real. Like, I don't feel like these are real characters. Saying that, I do like a lot of what he creates, and I do think a lot of it's fun. I think he's just a solid, good time writer. So yeah, he's going to go in there, and I'd probably put him right around Dugan level. Yeah, I'm pretty there. Simone is a really underrated writer. I know some people have like problems with her, whatever, with stupid ass political stuff, but as a writer herself, she's actually really solid. Birds of Prey, that's a very long run she's written, and almost all of it is good, if not great. On top of that, she's written some really great indie stuff that you guys should check out. But yeah, Gail Simone just writes some really solid stuff. I think the biggest thing, you know, recently reading her Jessica Jones comic, Variants, is that she really knows how to get the core and the heart of these characters, and that's important when you're writing the big two, because sometimes they could just feel like cardboard cutouts of what you watched on a movie or a TV show. So for me, I think she really does make mostly great stuff. There's only like one or two things I've read where I'm like, the rest have been pretty much great, and so I think she belongs in the greats. I would probably say Gaiman and stuff are a little bit higher for me, but I put her with Johns in terms of like, if I see her name, I'm gonna pick up, especially DC. Slott, there's very few things I enjoy from Slott. I do think some of his stuff is good. I don't hate his Spider-Man run or anything, but when I read his stuff, I'm kind of just prepared to go, this is okay or pretty good sometimes, but mostly there's very few things like I'm clamoring for when I see his name on it. I think he's a nice guy. I would love to sit down and talk comics with him. I know he's a huge fan of these comics, but as terms as like his writing style, it's just not for me altogether. Snyder, Snyder's a huge reason I got into DC. I think his New 52 Batman is phenomenal. I think Black Mirror is my favorite Batman comic of all time. That would be hard to choose, but it's up there. But yeah, I think Snyder is an excellent writer when he wants to be. I think, unfortunately, the later DC career, they either the editors just went off the rails or let him do what he wants. And Snyder turned into his unique self into more of a mimicky version of Morrison for me. Now, I feel like he has definitely gotten back to his roots in these last couple of years of his comicsology, independent work has really, really proved to me that he's still got it, and I'm really enjoying a lot of it. So I think he's great with only a few misses. Mostly the last 2 years of his DC was not for me. And saying that, the great stuff really just impressed me in some of my favorite comics. So I'm putting him really high up there with probably Hickman. Soule is definitely a solid writer. He's almost great for me. I really enjoyed his Daredevil. But he just doesn't blow me away. But I will say I'd probably put him with Ewing and Morrison as someone I'll always check out, but I'm not always impressed 100% with. Spencer, same thing. I think he's a unique writer, kind of up there with Ewing. Yeah, I put him right behind Ewing, where I'll check out his stuff. I usually enjoy most of it. I actually like his creator-owned stuff even more, though he never finishes any of them. But yeah, he's a solid fun time. Sue, I can't say her name. I'm so sorry. She is a solid writer as well. I think that I've liked a lot of her stuff, but I never loved any of it. Her Captain Marvel was pretty solid. Again, not one of my favorites. We'll get to someone else who I think has a much better Captain Marvel run. But I do think that her Aquaman run was at least fun most of the time and interesting. Yeah, she's someone, Bitch Planet, like things like that, hopefully I'm getting that right, but I'm pretty sure she wrote Bitch Planet. Stuff like that I do enjoy. So, saying that, a solid good time, probably a little ahead of most of these guys, probably right around there for me. Taylor, one of my favorites of all time. I think he's written some of my favorite comics. I will say, unfortunately, I think some of his recent stuff feels very much like Weightless. Does that make sense? I don't mean weightless like no weight at all. I kind of more mean like it doesn't have stakes, and I definitely feel that. So yeah, Taylor definitely worked on some of my favorite of all time, but I do think some of his recent stuff, while still always entertaining, just hasn't blown me away. I'd say probably right around here, right with Remender, King, and Cates. These three are kind of all in that same area, whereas I think Lamar, Brubaker, and Bendis, those are probably my top three so far. Thompson consistently puts out good to great stuff, and nobody seems to want to acknowledge that. I'm just kidding. I know she was like nominated for awards and stuff, but I really enjoy Thompson's stuff. I feel one thing she does very, very well is the human side to comics, the relatability, just the human nature of wanting to read a comic and relate to it right away. Thompson nails that. I think I almost always enjoy all her characters in her book. I also think she made a Captain Marvel run that is great, which is so nice and refreshing to have. And yeah, I just really enjoy her sense of humor. It's very fun. And also her Black Widow, so good. And if you haven't read Shark, what's his name? Shark. I'm gonna look it up. Jeff the Shark. It's friggin' hilarious. I love it. So yeah, Thompson's up there with some really great stuff. I would actually, when I see her name now, I almost always want to read it. So I'm putting that high up there with like Snyder and Hickman in terms of like when I see her name coming out with a comic, I'm gonna pick it up. Tomasi is definitely a great writer. I do think some of his stuff doesn't work for me. I did not like his Detective Comics, but saying that, I think his Green Lantern run is fucking phenomenal. I think a lot of his creator-owned stuff is really weird and good in a good way. You know, weird like, ooh, spooky. And yeah, I think he's a great writer. I really do. I just think that he has a few misses that hold him back from being some of my favorite of all time. I probably put him up there with like Johns and Miller and things like that, where I think they are sometimes putting out some of the best stuff, and other times it's just like, not for me. Tinian. Right, Tinian, did I say that right? I think I said it right. Absolutely putting out some of the best stuff right now. Last House on the Left was phenomenal, as well as almost everything else he's putting out currently, like Something is Killing the Children. But I also liked his DC stuff. I really enjoyed his Detective Comics run. So I would say consistently right now, he's probably putting out some of the best work, and I'd put him high up there with Lemire. See, like I said, creator-owned is a big deal for me. I like Big Two, but creator-owned is what really makes me enjoy his stuff. And Tinian and Lemire have some of the best, if not the best, creator-owned stuff coming out right now with Brubaker. Venditti, never liked his stuff. I tried so many times to get into his stuff. I just could not. I just don't like his stuff. Wade, another great writer. Another writer, though, I will say, I feel like he holds himself back. I feel like he's always on the verge of surpassing and creating some of my craziest, best comics, but he never does. But he does create a lot of great stuff, and I do like his Wally West run a lot, as well as some of his creator-owned stuff like Empire and stuff. So I do think he's a good writer. I just think that he's not the most amazing writer that he is capable. So kind of like Busiek, I feel like those two are almost side by side for me in terms of I always read their stuff, but sometimes it just doesn't click with me 100%. Wells, I really like Wells. I know some people are not liking his recent stuff, which is fine, but I personally am enjoying it. But I will say I put him more in the solid. I don't think I read anything that blew me away, but I'd say I enjoy him a little bit more than Spencer and stuff like that. So yeah, I put him right there. Williams, solid writer, a lot of fun. I think people forget that comics are just consistently putting out fun and crazy and zany stuff, and I think she does that. I don't think I've ever read anything where I'm like, wow, this is amazing, but I read a lot of stuff where I'm like, this is pretty good, this is pretty fun. I liked her X Factor. And I think she also really loves these characters, which if I feel that when I'm reading something, that to me automatically makes me enjoy the writing more. I have not read her creator-owned stuff, and I always want to, but I haven't yet. So saying that, I'm going to put in solid fun time, and I'm going to put her pretty high up there. Williamson, you know, he's created some of the stuff that I didn't like, and I think some of his stuff kind of Flanders, whatever the fuck. But I also will say that I do enjoy some of the stuff a lot, and that's always a nice thing. I really actually enjoyed Dark Infinity, whatever the hell the new Dark Infinite, whatever it was, I enjoyed it. I also think that he is a capable writer most of the time. I don't think I ever hated something he wrote, but there's some stuff I think is just good. This is a hard one. I'd probably say he's right up there with like Morrison and Soule. Like, I'm pretty much always going to check out his stuff, but not everything always clicks for me. Wilson, kind of the same thing, right, Wilson? I don't want to mess up your name. Miss Marvel's creator. I enjoy Miss Marvel, but that's the only thing that I actually really enjoyed from her. Everything else I've read has been okay. So saying that, I think I would put him right over, right in the middle of everybody. Wolfman, never was a huge fan. There's only a few things I enjoy, like some of his Superman stuff. Kind of put him in the same area as Slott. Yang, solid, but not one of the ones that I'm always looking for. Again, kind of in the middle of solid. Like, I'll check out his stuff, but it's not high on my list. Yost, probably one of the most underappreciated X-Men writers of all time. Gonna put him high up there in the greats, probably right in the middle, right there with Moore and Ellis. Zdarsky, yeah, you know what? Just for Daredevil, you're going up there. I just think, and Public Domain is excellent too. I just think he has a lot of heart when he writes. I don't know if I ever read some from him that I liked as much as, say, something like Deceased or Injustice from Taylor and so on, but he's the newer one that's kind of creeping up on these fellows here. He's doing a good job. That sounds really weird. Is that Zub? So I'm weird. Isn't it Zub Wells? Did I always think they're the same, but they're two different people? Put him right there next to him. Who's that? Russell. Who the fuck is Russell? And we end the list with none other than Ennis. He's created some of the worst things I ever read, like The Pro. He's created some of the greatest things I ever read, like Preacher. So I don't really know how to kind of rate him in the end for me, but he does create some great stuff. I would put him in great stuff, but very low because he's created some of the worst stuff. But his great stuff really shines for me. I think Preacher's absolutely one of the best comics. I think his Punisher run is really solid. And I think Sarah, which he recently put out just a few years ago, man, that shit wrecked me. So he's going to go in the grave for me. I only read a couple of things I think sucked. But yeah, that's the list. Where the fuck is Kirkman? Where's Brian K. Vaughan? Like, I get this list is like kind of the modern writers, but like Brian K. Vaughan is putting out Saga, one of the greatest comics of all time still. And Robert Kirkman literally has like 4 fucking TV shows going on for his comics. Plus he's still making comics. What? Anyway, if they were on here, those are actually in my top 5 comic writers of all time. But they're not. Anyway, this is my list. You know, I like a lot of comic writers. I think a lot are really solid, and I'll check out their stuff. There's only a few on here that I really have no interest checking out their stuff when I see their name, or I'm not that interested. But for the most part, anyone, all the way even Millar, I will be interested enough to at least check it out when I can. Anything up from there, it just starts going up and up, and more interest for me to check it out. And as it goes up in my list, these are the more and more things I probably enjoyed from these writers. So it's kind of bizarre, you know, like when I look back how much I enjoy some of this stuff from these writers and some of the stuff that kind of fell through. Like, I would love to see your list. So this is a lot. You don't have to put all these. But, you know, how about your top 5 comic writers of all time? You can list that. Or maybe top 3 that you love and that you want always interested to pick up. And then 3 that you're not really that interested in picking up and they're not really for you. Let's be respectful here. I like to interact with you guys, but I also like to interact with comic writers and artists because they are what brings me a lot of entertainment, and I'm trying to be respectful here. Any of the writers here that I was messing around with, like Millar, I doubt you're watching this, but of course I'm just joking around. I think you have created some of the more enjoyable comics I've read, just that not some of my favorite topics. But anyway, none of these writers here I think are awful in terms of like the worst writing ever or anything. There's just some here that I don't enjoy reading much. They're up there, you see. But as you can see, love a lot of writers. Anyway, I'm gonna shut up. This is like a 50-minute video, at least here before editing. Hope you guys enjoyed. If you did, make sure to hit the like button. If you love me, hit the subscribe button, and I will see you later. Wow, that was really weird. I'm never gonna do that again.